Welcome, everyone, and hello. You are honestly, in my book, some of my favorite people in the world to sign up for and attend a 2-hour fundraising training on a Thursday. For those of us that aren't familiar, I just want to give a quick introduction of myself before we start diving in so you know who I am and why I'm here. Hi, I'm Haley. I use she, they pronouns. I'm the founder and executive director of a group called Donor Organizer Hub. We're focused on building the base in the progressive movements through everyday people fundraising for them. So our primary constituents are volunteer fundraisers, which isn't this fun? Most, if not all of us in this room are volunteers and we're looking to fundraise it. So y'all are our primary constituents. And I began myself about a decade ago in movement space as a volunteer fundraiser. And I'm sharing that basic information with you because everything I'm going through with you today, about a decade ago, I was going through these materials myself, both to figure out how can I build my team, but also what are we going to be doing together? How are we going to be able to raise these funds? This is just a quick grounding slide because fundraising trainings could be all kinds of things, right? Like it's saying, I'm going to give you a data training. There's so many things about data that we could cover, and we only have so much time together. So I was talking with the California Grassroots Alliance Money team, and we decided together to focus on a couple things. I just want to be very clear on what we're going to focus on today. You're welcome to be here if this doesn't meet your exact place right now, but don't want you to feel like you're not being listened to. It's just that today we're focused on a couple key things. So one, we're assuming in this training that you're committed to fundraising in 2024. You're not going to hear anything from me on why you should fundraise, how I think it's the coolest thing and everybody should be doing it. We do offer those trainings, but that's not today. What you are here for today is you're kind of like if y'all have been to a country diner and they have those big old menus and it takes a few minutes to kind of go through, but you want to make sure you don't feel that sort of menu jealousy if you see hash browns go by you and you're like, oh, those look so good. I should have ordered that. I should have looked at that. We're going to look at a menu of fundraising tactics for you all to decide what makes sense for your group. Second piece is you don't want to do fundraising alone. That sounds boring. You want to build a team. So today we're going to talk about how you can build a volunteer fundraising team. And the final thing, hopefully you want to make as much of an impact in 2024 as you can and beyond this year too. So a few groundings. This is kind of the housekeeping part, and then we're going to dive in. So this is a lot of information in 2 hours. Y'all are wonderful adults. Take care of yourselves as you need. Stretch, go grab some water, get off camera if you need to. Whatever you need to be present for today, super welcomed. The slides are being shared with you all during the training. So you should have the link in front of you, or you can, scroll up the Zoom chat to get the link. And that's because it is a very information dense training, and I want to make sure that you have access to the information live as we're going through it. We're also going to give you additional resources. Think of yourself as the elementary school kid going into a friend's birthday party and they give you the goodie bag afterward. We're going to give you additional resources after this training to help support you in your fundraising work. So you're not at it totally alone and from scratch. The final piece is that I'm going to do regular check-ins for questions. There might be some moments just based on what your question might be that it's juicier, that it takes a little more time. So we might park it for the end just so that we can make sure that we go through all the juicy content that we have today. And you can ask questions by raising your hand or typing in the chat. I will acknowledge as a facilitator, I'm a little slow sometimes to go check on the chat every so often. So if there's something urgent, feel free to raise your hand. And you can do that by going into raise hand gestures or the raise hand function within the bottom of your screen on Zoom. So our outcomes, you're going to come out of these 2 hours with these 3 things. One is you're going to know 14 different fundraising tactics. That's a lot. That's more than you're actually going to do, but you're going to learn all of them so that you know whatever decision you make is a decision that's right for you and you've explored all the options. You're getting the hash browns. The second is that we're going to go through 5 steps of how to build a volunteer fundraising team together. And finally, after the training, I've been advertising it, but I want to reinforce it. You're going to get a goodie bag. It shows up in a Google Drive. It's not candy, but it's the closest thing that Google Drive can give you that is like candy. So we're about to enter into the first part of our training. We're about to dive into learnings here. As a reminder, you have the slides in front of you, so there's no need to rigorously take notes on what you're seeing on these slides, unless you're so called to think about jotting down notes like this could be great for my group, or I don't know about this one. We're exploring a lot of them today. I'm going to break them down slowly and walk through the pros and cons. For each one of them, I want you to think to yourself, does this make sense for me and my group? Over time, you can combine multiple tactics. Today, what I'm going to be asking you when we go through all of these is to think about just one that sounds really sweet, sounds doable, sounds interesting, sounds fun, that you want to try it out. And we'll go from there. We'll build from there. So 4 types of tactics. So across the 14 different tactics, there's sort of different categories of them. And I just want to give an overall highlight of different ways that we can fundraise for people as volunteers. The first category is asking people. So making those individual fundraising asks. There's somebody that's an asker, and then you go to a list of people and you are directly soliciting them for money. The second is social gatherings. It is taking all the individuals, putting them in a room together and making that ask. So the first two are ones that really encompass a lot of what the kids would call organizing. The third is selling. And a lot of us might be familiar with this sort of process, but basically selling goods and services in exchange for donations. And then the fourth category that we have here is digital. I'm sure your inboxes and your phones are very familiar with this one. It is using for technology to be able to fundraise, both broadcast and individual asks. For all of those that are just joining us right now, hello, welcome. You came just in time. We are diving into fundraising tactics, and we are just starting right at the top, so this will be great. So the first one, asking people. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go through this, and then I'm going to pop into the chat and see how things are going with y'all, and just open the floor for questions on this category of tactics, because there's a lot to digest. It's a big old table, right? Asking people. So mentioning earlier, this is individualized asks, and there's 3 types of tactics here. We got the personal asks, we got phone banks, we got door-to-door. I know we have a lot of invisible crew in the room here, so a lot of y'all are familiar with some of these tactics that are applied to voters, not to donors. But let's start from the top. So personal asks. These are honestly a really great way to raise a lot of money. It's very efficient. And the way that personal asks look is I, the asker, go to somebody and say, hey, I have been working with group X that I'm really excited about. We have really great plans for 2024. We're looking to raise X amount of dollars, and I'd really love to talk with you about it and invite you to join us. Would you be down to have coffee, meet on Zoom, talk on the phone? The person says yes to you, and then you basically make that ask there. You listen to a bit about what their concerns are, hear them back, kind of digest that, and connect that to whatever your organization's work is. So you raise a lot of money with them, quite honestly. You especially raise a lot of money if you know the people personally, because people are more likely to give ambitious donations when they already know and trust you. The thing that always comes up with groups is that, you do have to make a team of askers. You don't want to do this thing alone. You and a list of 50 people, you can't make 50 coffee dates. That's a lot. Which means that you have to train people on making an ask. And I know in the progressive and democratic space, it's not the most popular activity. I have my own feelings about it that are different from the majority, but it can be tricky to sort of build a team of people that are specifically focused on asking. Second tactic, phone banks. Indivisible crowd is very familiar with this. Instead of contacting voters, though, this is contacting potential donors. And so this is a great method. If you have a ton of people to ask, what I often tell people is if you have over 200 people and you can't make those more intimate connections, phone banking is a great way to sort of work through it. It's also really helpful if those people are already receptive to your cause. I would never recommend for phone banking to reach out to a cold list. Some people, buy lists of data of donors. I would not do that. Really think about people that have been to your events before or that you have some kind of personal connection with. For those that are phone banking currently or have phone banked recently, We do know that the contact rate is a lot lower, right? Like people just aren't answering their phones as much. So that's something that, is worth considering. And you gotta train people. But again, if you do any kind of voter contact through phone banking, you can take those guys and adapt them pretty quickly. The final one, and this is kind of a spicy one for a lot of people, but actually this is something that a lot of fundraising groups that are volunteer led did after 2016 elections, was going door to door. So it actually is thinking about a target constituency that you don't already have a deep relationship with. Oftentimes there's a group based out of the DC area. They're called Nope Neighbors, and they went around and canvassed at different places that had those yard signs of "in this house, we believe Black Lives Matter," blah, blah, blah. And what they would do is they would knock on the door. They would say, "Hey, I'm one of your neighbors. It looks like we share the same values. We're pissed off about Trump being elected too. We're having this event, on this day, would love for you to come by." And so what I would recommend with door to door, nobody really likes an explicit fundraising solicitation at the door, but it's a great way to invite people into a social gathering that you're having, or invite them into your group, something that is a goal in addition to fundraising. Train people to canvas is very similar to training people to phone bank. If you do any kind of voter contact canvassing work, you can adapt those materials pretty straightforward. I did a lot more talking than I like to do at trainings. I want to give a big old pause and say, do folks have questions? Do they have comments or observations about asking people for donations? I'm going to look at the chat while you sort of marinate. Nancy's excited to go to the houses with those signs. They are all over a lot of neighborhoods, and it's great targets, right? It's like, you don't necessarily know those people yet, but you can always knock the door and say, "Hey," and introduce yourself as a neighbor. Do folks have any questions, clarifying questions on asking people? I'll give it a few second pause and then we'll go forward. We're 3 out of 14 tactics in, y'all. You're getting so powerful. Okay, the next one is social gatherings. This is a meaty one. There's a lot of ways we can gather people to raise funds. And so we're going to be talking about house parties. We're going to talk about community events, pledge raising events, and then pitching at events. I'm going to start from the top. So house parties and community events are actually pretty similar. A key difference is that house parties are sort of invite only. They're usually at somebody's own house, so you don't want to, put it on next door or something. Whereas community events, you would feel comfortable sharing the address and information at your local coffee shop. It's open to all. It's open to the public. House parties, I tell this to folks time and time again, it is a great way to raise money very quickly. And it's also among the easiest tactics to do. Each house party tends to take only 1 to 2 people to organize. Where I have seen house parties work very successfully for groups is those 1 to 2 people, one of the persons is a host, and the other person is kind of a buddy or a mentor for a whole bunch of hosts. They kind of have like a little checklist they can work through with the host, and the host takes care of reaching out to their network specifically. So for a house party to be useful, you definitely want to have enthusiastic people that are willing to tap into their networks and invite them into their home. And it's really especially great if you want to introduce new people to a cause, to your organization. And something to think about with house parties is ideally it's a comfortable spot. There's, available seating for people to hang out. Nobody's too stuffed up or around. And that it's also a solid location. So for those of us that are in urban areas, thinking about what does public transit look like? What does parking look like? So something to think about with house parties, and this comes up time and time again with volunteers. They'll come to me and be like, "Haley, Susie's house can only fit 15 people. So we can only invite 15 people." And there's this thing called organizing math. Not 100% of people you invite attend, and it might be for structural reasons, like I'm out of town that day. It might just be at last minute, people flake. I sometimes flake. We're flaky as humans sometimes. So what organizer math looks like and what it looks like is at each step, of an action, half of the people take that action. So if you invite 20 people, 10 people are probably going to RSVP, and then 5 of those 10 people who RSVP will come. So I always say, you know, kind of 25 to 35% of people that you invite are going to ultimately attend. So you can kind of think about that in terms of your house and capacity. Community events. This is also a great way to raise visibility of a project, to introduce new people to a cause, and it brings people together in sort of a broader community sense. So it's not just my friends and people that I know, it becomes, oh my gosh, we all live within, you know, 8 square blocks of each other. How have we not met before? Which can be really sweet. The expectations are a little higher for a community event because these people don't know you. So we always say, you know, expect 2 to 3 months to organize that sort of event, because you want to think about what's a free or reduced rental space. How do we think about the sign-in process? Where do chairs go? Food and refreshments. So it does require a bit more upfront resources than community events. I often tell people with house parties, the reason why it's so low stakes is because they're your friends and they love you. So if you just put out potato chips and some wine and beer, they're going to be okay with that. But maybe some strangers from the community might want a little more for a gathering. So the next one is pledge raising events. I think a lot of us might be familiar with these. It's sort of like a dance marathon, or if you know anybody that's run a marathon or something and they've raised funds, the idea being, I'm going to do something ambitious. Usually it's a physical, ambitious thing. And I am looking for sponsors. Will you support me with $5 per mile that I run, or some sort of quantity like that? These can be really great community building events, and I would say that they are best served when you have a whole group of people that just refuse to ask people for money. They find it to be easier to ask for sponsors. Again, you know, there's kind of this thing that I always love reflecting with people on of, you know, you're making an ask still, but nonetheless, for some reason, there's less of a barrier to asking for a sponsor because they're going to be doing something versus just asking people straight up for money. You also want to have a bare minimum of participants before you take on this kind of event. So I often quote to people at least 10 people sort of doing that activity, whether it's running that marathon or dancing, you know, in a dance hall for a few hours, whatever the activity is. It's very similar to community events in that it takes around 2 to 3 months to organize. Something that's key with pledge raising, because there's kind of 2 steps to it, right? You're not getting the donation right away from folks. You're asking for people to pledge based on what you're doing, and then you want to collect the donations. So you want to make sure that you train volunteers to both collect pledges, but also collect donations after they do that action. Yes, Madeline, let's bring you to the front. Steve, let's go. Okay, Madeline first though.
I kind of just think of ideas. I don't know if they're great or not, but I was just thinking there are a lot of people that hate to do phone banking, and there are people that love it. And so wouldn't it be great if the people that love to phone bank sent out a letter that said, so you don't have to do it. Would you please support me? For every 100 phone calls I make, would you donate something? So it could be something like that. And it doesn't actually have to be, you know, dancing or walking or running or anything.
Ooh, I love that idea.
Do you
Everybody,
think that would work?
I think that's a really great idea. Honestly, it's not a secret that phone banking is kind of a pain in the butt right now, right? So I think it could be a fun inside joke too for our fellow progressive supporters. I think that's great. Hope y'all are taking notes. Madeline's got great ideas. Hit her up later. Steve.
We were trying to do a thing where we were fundraising for students to go out and do organizing and canvassing or whatever. So to raise, you know, they'd commit to doing 1,000 door knocks for, you know, $2,000 or some X government, whatever. So it's kind of reversed, but it's to get the pledge so that we'd actually go do something, as opposed to the raising the money, doing the performance, and then collecting the money.
Yep.
Because it gets you the money up front.
Yep. Love that. That's excellent. That's a great idea. And so Carol in the chat asked, how do you find people if you're not part of a group or in a neighborhood that seems receptive? That's a great question, Carol. Often and this is the lazy answer, but I'll give some context to it. It really does depend on where you are and who your people are. But something that I always recommend to folks is, get a couple people from your group together and do a brainstorming session. It could be something like, you'll come up with ideas like, oh, we'll post on Nextdoor to generate interest, or, oh, there's this community meeting going on, or, oh, people love to hang out at this coffee shop. Maybe we put some sort of, bullet posting there. I'm based in Oakland, and, there's a lot of neighborhoods in Oakland, but there's also a lot of people in Oakland. And, my particular neighborhood that I live in is not something that I would consider to be a great door knocking neighborhood necessarily, but a couple neighborhoods up, Rockridge is one. So, something I would look at if I was kind of in your place is, oh, okay, like, let's plan on something in Rockridge. Who do I know in Rockridge? How can we get, a group of people together? So it's a little bit based on your particular context. I want to invite folks in the room too. So with Carol's question, I'm just going to repeat it quickly. How do you find people if you're not part of a group or a neighborhood that seems receptive? Do folks have any ideas that they want to share?
I just dropped something in the chat that to Carol that maybe we could get her connected to an Indivisible group that's nearby.
Amazing. Thanks, Nancy. I'll leave it to you, friend, to get Carol connected. And then so Tom says, for house parties, do you usually expect the host, the person whose house you've been invited to make the pitch for the cause, or can you have a content expert for the cause and the host to team up? That's a great question. Anna, totally, both can work. Completely agreed. Something, that I've offered for people is, part of the checklist when you work with a host is to have that conversation of who makes the fundraising ask and to talk through sort of what I would call the pros and cons. The pros, for the person that's hosting doing it, even if they just say a couple words, they don't have to give the full pitch. It connects their network, the people that are there, with the cause directly. They can kind of see it more materially. But of course, the sort of content experts, some people are just like, they love doing pitches. I've gone to many house parties for hosts and done pitches for them. So there's not a super right or wrong answer, but something that I encourage for any host is to give a little bit of a testimonial about how much they enjoyed hosting the house party so that they can encourage other people to host the house party. That's always a little trick that's fun to insert for people so that you can make one house party turn into 3 more house parties.
Right. Yeah. And in part, I was asking almost for the reverse of, do we need the host to become kind of all up to speed on the content of the thing that you're raising the funds for, or can we bring somebody, because it would be easier, I think, in some ways to have somebody who's used to giving that presentation, can be invited in as a third party or something like that, doesn't know all the people in the room, but it's better to answer, more capable of answering questions and all that kind of stuff. And then they can team up for the pitch itself.
I love that. I think that's spot on, Tom. And, I mean, there could be a benefit for the person to get to know more, but especially if you're thinking about scaling out house parties as a tactic, it's nice to have people come in. Force Multiplier is a volunteer fundraising group based in the Boston area, and they do exactly that. They have a person that kind of comes and they're sort of the content wizard. They go to all the house parties and say the same pitch, here's Force Multiplier, here are ways to plug in, So I think that's great. And then Vera, hello, Vera, glad you're joining us, asks, what are your thoughts about the style of communication outreach for different kinds of gatherings, email, phone, or other? That's excellent question. And we'll get to this for digital when we talk about digital fundraising, but for a lot of us, class of 2016, if we started our, activism journey sort of after Trump, it was kind of a peak mobilization period. We might not ever see that again in our lifetimes. And so we were able to just kind of send the BCC'd email and people would show up in swarms because we were all panicked. But most of the time it's not like that, right? For those of us that want to go to something, we need some reminders. So what I recommend for communication for outreach, specifically for those that is think about how you already communicate with them. My own best friend doesn't respond to emails that I send her. She has 21,000 unread messages. Whereas if I send her a text, she'll respond within a couple hours. So thinking about the existing communication channels, if these are people that you don't really know, what you could do is, for high priority folks, you could kind of, segment the data and think about, okay, these people have attended something before, so maybe they get a phone call first. And those who haven't, it's a big old list, so we'll email them. So you can kind of play around with it, but at a high level, what I would say is that people are very responsive to text reminders on average. 97% of texts that are sent that get to people's phones, they actually read. Emails, it's a lot lower than that if any of y'all work in email marketing, you know. And so also too, you know, if you regularly communicate with somebody on phone, leaving a voicemail, if they are people that check their voicemails, not the worst thing either. So Rebecca asks, is there data and studies that show the most effective ways to fundraise for specific causes? For specific causes, honestly, so this presentation is intentionally cause agnostic, if you're talking about specific, but most effective ways to fundraise. Yes, absolutely. And I'll go through a bigger summary piece after kind of go through all these tactics, but at a high level, when you create a space where people feel like they can connect personally to the cause and then also connect in community with each other, that tends to be the highest impact. There are some statistics. I will grab the citations later, but there's a recent study that came out that when donors know each other, they, over the course of a lifetime, give 3 to 5 times more to a cause than if they didn't know each other previously. So social gatherings over time are a great way to sort of build what's called donor lifetime value, meaning just the amount that a donor gives over time. And Tom, how explicit are you about a house party being a fundraising event? Does that inhibit people from attending? You know, we'll talk about this, the last one, with pitching at events for events that aren't specifically fundraising. Some people might not attend, and they're not the people that you want there. And there's different models that you can think about with events. There are some fundraising groups that say, hey, come learn more about us, you know, nothing in advance needed, just come hang out, no expectations of donation. That's fine. I really hate to say this one, but it really is dependent on your group. But those that are explicitly fundraising parties, people come already in their head knowing, okay, I am going to move some resources. So they're thinking about a bit more ahead of time. They're thinking about, okay, you know, am I going to give by check? Am I going to get, you know, like they have the logistics prepared already. So actually, this is going to be a nice segue into the fourth, yeah, on social pressure at work, 100%. So pitching at events, this is the fourth tactic I want to cover with us today. Thank you, Tom, for the segue. This is where you have something else happening. This could be a training, this could be a rally, whatever it might be for your group. And you insert a fundraising pitch at the end. So the primary focus isn't fundraising, but you insert that inspirational pitch at the end. And this is actually how I was brought up into fundraising. Every single training that Showing Up for Racial Justice had, every single rally, any public event, at the very end, there was a little bit where we captured the enthusiasm, the momentum. And we said, it's, you know, just kind of honoring, like, it's so great to be in space with you all today. Look at how much we learned or we did. We need your support to continue this work, you know, XYZ, you know, big pitch here, insert logistics of how to support us. And it raises dollars. And it's a really sweet way also for people that are attending that event to feel like they are providing extra impact. In terms of how it shows in fundraising outcomes, you're just going to raise less money than you are for a specific fundraising event, especially when you're talking about people that might have access to, say, donor advised funds, or maybe they can write a check with a couple of zeros on it. A fundraising event is really great to kind of get people prepared ahead of time. If they could donate $500, they're going to donate $500 at the fundraising house party. They might only donate $50 if it's kind of a surprise, you know, pitch to them because they're not prepared ahead of time. All right, so we have come to the end. We are over halfway through, y'all, on the tactics. You're getting so knowledgeable. Do we have any final questions on social gatherings before we head into our next phase of our tactics journey? I take silence as we are moving forward, but if things come to your mind, feel free to continue raising hands and putting in chat. Third category is selling. Selling is kind of a spicy one, I will say, because oftentimes volunteers will come to us and they'll be like, Haley, we spent so much time planning this wine and cheese tasting. We charged $50 a person, and then we pitched more at the event. The event only raised like $400. Why is that? Okay, yeah, it's very frustrating. And it can be disappointing also, because some of our best friends will be in attendance and you're like, why didn't you step up more? The selling category in general can be tricky because oftentimes people aren't thinking about the cause first. They're thinking about this good or service that they're getting first. And so if your friend bought the wine and cheese tasting ticket, they're like, oh, it's already built in, friend. Like, I paid you the $50. Come on now. So that's just something to think about with all these categories. And I think they're fun ones to consider, don't get me wrong, but I just want to help y'all avoid the most common fumble that I see for newbie fundraisers is they're like, why do people give more? They give as much as you basically set for the good or service. So at the top, we have selling services. Selling services could be any kind of service. You could get a bunch of cute kids together. I mean, to do a car wash, you could do cooking class, lemonade stand, like they're making lemonade for you, whatever it is. This is really great if you have the people that are able to perform the services. So the kids doing the car wash, if you're doing a wine and cheese tasting, pairing somebody to make you feel really fancy about what the wine and the cheese is. And it's also great if you don't have a big enough list of people, to ask for a direct contribution, because, you can set up a car wash kind of wherever. People need their cars washed regardless of, what's going on with your cause. So things to consider is it's not building a list of, sort of ongoing supporters. And you want to make sure that the location is very accessible to those services. You don't want to post a car wash, and deep in the suburbs in a gated community. You're going to have a very limited number of customers. So garage sales is the next category. We've all been to a garage sale. They're fun. Also great for when you don't have a big enough list of people that it's also great if you have a sort of hot location, if you're in the midst of downtown Berkeley near a bunch of students who love going to a good old garage sale and getting a steal. That can be a way to go. And it's also a great way to purge your stuff that you don't really want. But to get more than a couple $100s, because I'm sure some of us in this room have been a part of a garage sale before, done a garage sale in our homes. To get more than a couple $100s, you need several households involved. So getting all that stuff together to raise funds. And then the last two, so we have auctions and raffles. It looks like Rebecca has a question in the chat. What's the best way to make the trade-off for entry fee for a fundraiser versus number of people to attend? That's a great question. So actually an initial question I would ask Rebecca is, do you want an entry fee for a fundraiser? If you're talking about selling services, you definitely want an entry fee versus number of people attending. It's all got to be guesswork. It's really tricky, but for the wine and cheese pairing example, it's like, okay, how many people can we expect to get into a room? I usually start with the number of people and then I sort of backtrack. Wine and cheese people tend to have a little bit more of a pocketbook, going for them because they like wine, they like cheese. I'm a wine and cheese person too. I've got a little bit of a pocketbook. But so if we're like, okay, we can get 20 people into a room, how much, do we want to think about charging them to make the effort worthwhile? I think it'd be very key, honestly, to think about what makes the effort worthwhile, because you're doing all of the same things as you would be for setting up a house party, perhaps even setting up a community event, but you're selling services. You're not, explicitly asking for money for the cause. So, you might want to think, okay, if we want to raise $2,000 with 20 people, that means $100 a ticket. So kind of just playing around with that mental math. So it's kind of just an exercise of how many people can you get in the door? Is it worth it to put that much effort, for whatever goal, and then kind of work back from there. Same question for a house party or community event. Great question, Anna. So for a house party or community event, there is ultimately the question, and there aren't perfect answers for it on, do you charge an initial entry fee or do you save it all for the fundraising pitch? For both a house party and community event, no matter what, you should be having a fundraising pitch at the event. Capture people in the moment. If you're offering, some wine or beer, I'll be honest, it does help people with feeling liberated to give more. And they're, extra excited about the cause. You want to capture that moment. So that should be, without a doubt, what happens. The ticket price, oftentimes, it's a little dependent on social norms. So if you're around a lot of people that do a lot of candidate giving, they're used to, buying that big table for, $10,000 for entry into a space. That might be worth considering. If you're with a group of folks who aren't used to those social norms, it might be worthwhile to try having free entry and see how that goes. It's something you want to experiment around with based on your group. There's a difference between selling event versus service stuff. Steve, could you come off of mute and elaborate on your question?
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that, I mean, you were talking about like if you have $50 entrance fee to an event that's basically a social gathering, wine and cheese, that kind of stuff, and people kind of think, well, I paid for this or whatever, but there's some built-in things. But there's other things where, like you're selling something that the actual donation is the stuff that your volunteers or your group is bringing to the table, i.e. car washes, massage services, all those kinds of things, etc. There's a kind of a different model there, because basically that's you don't you don't have to think about what your cost structure is so much as what your ask is, as opposed to the other one is you have to ask you have to figure out, that was the entrance fee, now how do I ask for more? And there's kind of a two-stage thing, right? Whereas, and we just got asked by somebody who wants to make stuff for us so that we can sell it, so we can raise funds. And my first response was, well, first of all, I'm sorry, I'm going to go to my inner capitalist and ask, does anybody going to buy this before I can actually think if it's a good idea, if you will. I mean, so it gets complicated when you're selling things and stuff as opposed to some of these other methods. Fair?
Totally, absolutely. And we're gonna get real into that with raffles, because I'm about to tell you that I'm not a lawyer and you should consult a lawyer about doing a raffle. Yes, Anna, exactly. Volunteer labor versus material costs, that's spot on. Tom says possible to do a hybrid between house party and community event that's virtual, target invitation list, presentation, and ask. Yes, we're gonna get into different things to consider with each of these tactics. One of them being, do you do remote? Do you do in person? Do you do hybrid? The short answer for you is absolutely, Tom. So to cover the last two of selling, just so that we feel like we understand the universe of what selling is, there's a concept of auctions. I'm sure a lot of us have been to events where there's been a silent auction. You can also do a real-time auction if you're feeling kind of kitschy and throwbacky, and have, some sort of auctioneer with a paddle, and people, raise their little paddles to, raise more. I haven't personally been involved in that, maybe contact somebody else if you want to talk about real-time auction, but it is an option to do. So with auctions, some things to think about is you can add a silent auction to an existing event. A lot of times folks will do that, especially with house parties or community events, is just kind of scatter some stuff around. The key thing with auctions is that you want high quality goods and services that people want, thinking about tapping into local businesses, into, maybe somebody in your volunteer group make some really great cookies. I don't know, whatever it is, but people really want it. The difference between that and garage sales is that, people might not want that stuff, and they kind of know going into it, they're going to get a bargain of some kind. Auctions, it's polished, super cool materials where people are going to have a little bidding war with each other. Auctions, the key thing, you want to have a detail-oriented person on your team, because there's going to be at least 50 items, 25 items, whatever it is. You got to track, what is this item? Who won it? What's their contact info? Are we going to follow up with them to make sure they get that? It's a lot of logistics. So you want to make sure that you get somebody that doesn't get lost in the details. For a real-time auction, it's often said that you want at least 25 people for it to be successful. And also for a real-time auction, you gotta have an auctioneer with personality. You can't have a dud. I love my spouse, but he is a boring public speaker. You're not gonna get him on the floor being like, would anybody like this painting started at $100? You need somebody that's like, hey, who wants this painting, y'all? Look at this. This is great. $100. We're gonna start at $100. That is a steal. Somebody better bid 100. You got to have a very charismatic person to do an auction in real time. Final one is raffles. So raffles are really great when you know that people are unlikely to give more than a very small gift. Also great for people that feel nervous to ask for money. For some reason, people feel maybe more comfortable going up to the public and asking for them to buy a raffle ticket. This is where I say I'm not a lawyer. You gotta organize carefully to avoid gambling laws, y'all. Be very careful. You need a lot of people willing to sell tickets. You gotta make sure they work the crowd at whatever event that they're doing a raffle for. If it's a high school basketball game, they're going into the bleachers and asking everybody, you want a raffle ticket? Who wants a raffle ticket? So you got to have some charismatic sellers there too. And if taking cash, it's really easy for ticket sellers to get that stuff lost. I see some things in the chat, but also want to say, opening up to the floor, what questions do we have? Lisa, gambling laws. Yes. So, you are not guaranteed in a raffle to win a prize, which can tie into gambling. And so you want to make sure, technically under national law, and everybody has their own local jurisdictions that give more details on this, but technically a person should be able to get a raffle ticket without paying any money in order for it to not be considered gambling. And you want to make sure that your ticket sellers are very trained up on making sure that what this is coming across as is a charity event and not gambling. Oh, yes. And Vera, thank you. You mentioned this. So Boulder Advocacy, and I'll have Vera share this in the chat since I'm in slide share mode. Boulder Advocacy is a really great resource for the progressive left, specifically on figuring out what are campaign finance laws, what are things that we can and cannot do with money. And they have a really great hotline that you can call. So you can call them, leave a voicemail of whatever question that you have. And usually within, I would say, 2 to 3 business days, they'll get back to you with a response. So that's a free lawyer you can contact about gambling laws if you want to do a raffle. Do folks have other questions about selling goods and services? Amazing. Okay.
This is kind of a comment, and sorry, I don't remember the details, but I seem to remember having heard about an auction that didn't actually involve any stuff, you know, that it was like come and make a bid, but you weren't bidding on anything except contributing to the cause. Sorry, I don't know more details than that, but it was an intriguing idea.
That is an intriguing idea. Folks, take notes. I will say too, if we're being honest, there are probably thousands of fundraising tactics. What we are going through in the 14 today are the most common for volunteers. So that's a great fun little hybrid there, is it's kind of auction and it sounds like kind of a social gathering. Okay, so I'm gonna look at the chat really quickly. Okay, thanks Vera for sharing that. How do you feel about having your donors compete over donations? That is a great open question, Anna. I have not had personal experience with the auction process for donations, so that's something to definitely bring back to your groups and think about if you're interested in exploring that. And I would love to hear the results if you do experiment with it. Fourth one is digital. Oh, digital. So yeah, we know this. Democrats spam and scam the heck out of us. They're always telling us that the world's gonna die unless we donate $5 now. Nonetheless, it can actually be a really useful tool for us depending on what our needs are. I want to go through these in particular, just acknowledging, I think, a trend that I have noticed for folks, and we talked about this a little at the top of the session, is that people, if they get nervous about sort of in-person contact or person-to-person contact, they're like, I could just send an email, right? And people will magically come, or like, I can just send an email and they'll magically donate. And, I don't think any of us have made the biggest decisions in our lives through an email, through a social media post. We might do something, but we might not do the full capacity of what we're doing. Is kind of the takeaway from these tactics. But we got email, we got social media, we got text banks. Email is great if you don't need a large amount of money. And it's also great if your group has such a large list that they can't even phone bank or text bank them. I mean, I would say, sort of in the 4 digits. Like, you should be using email as your primary tool only if you have 4 to 5 digits of people. So 1,000, 10,000 people on your list that you're trying to raise for. And that's actually, how, professional consultants for Democratic candidates do it, right? Is they get these really huge lists of us, only a very small percentage donate, and we only donate a small percentage of what we could give. But if you just milk out enough people, you're going to get a lot of money. Things to consider, as I was mentioning, is that people tend to see email as broadcast and not direct contact, especially if it's a newsletter or it's a BCC'd email. Even if you have a mail merge kind of thing where people can say like, hi, Lisa, ask them for money, people still kind of know it's automated software. And this is an old, sort of tried and true thing. I don't really know how the past couple of years have impacted this tried and true reference guide, but ideally you make at least 3 touch points with people before they actually donate over email. So the first email that somebody gets, honestly, they ignore it because our inboxes are overwhelming. second email that they get, they're like, oh, I should donate. And then they don't. I'm one of those people too. And then the third one that they get, they actually finally do donate. To be honest with you, that number could be impacted a lot further. You might need to actually send a lot more before people donate now that people are getting so many emails. But just to say that it does take multiple points of contact before somebody donates. So I don't want anybody to feel hurt feelings if you send, an email to a bunch of your friends, BCC'd one time, and only a few people donate. That's expected behavior. Social media, she's an interesting one. Also do this if you don't need a large amount of money. And honestly, it's really only worth taking time on if your group or your members already have either a very large in numbers, or a very dedicated following, meaning like, I don't know, if one of y'all is on Facebook every day, 5 times a day, interacting with a lot of posts, because social media algorithms, although it's kind of a black box, they really give preferential treatment for those that have dedicated followers. With social media, you really do need some experience working with or around algorithms. I know I see a lot of folks, they're like, I hear the kids do digital, I should try digital. And it's just like, oh, don't waste your time on all of that. Like, people aren't going to see the content. There's this whole weird set of spoken and unspoken rules behind it. Sometimes just not worth getting into. And I'm going to make the bold declaration, and this is being recorded, so you can make a little YouTube clip out of this if you want. Social media has rarely, if ever, been an effective fundraising tactic. In the mid-2000s, I'm sure y'all remembered the good old ALS bucket challenge, people pouring ice buckets on themselves or donating to a cause. Went very viral. Every nonprofit and their mother was like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? Like, virality is such a thing. Interestingly enough, right after Roe versus Wade was overturned, a really dark time, a lot of people were doing rush donations, right, across the board. A lot of reproductive rights groups got historical amounts of money a couple summers ago. At that time, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who a lot of us know as Veep, a dear friend of mine, is her chief activism officer, meaning that he actually focuses on utilizing her digital platforms to bring people into action. And she did a rapid response fundraising campaign for reproductive rights groups across the country. She has probably, I would say, the biggest overlap of both big following, but also very dedicated following, specifically on the progressive left. She raised $150,000. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. Like, that's a huge number. It's an exciting number. But if that's the absolute most that you can get, and we're talking about the most popular political queen on social media doing all of the, experted things, just don't be surprised if when you post on social media, you raise $0 or $20. That's expected behavior. The third and final one is text banks. We do get a lot of texts on our phones, so we know that Democrats certainly are raising money this way. So, perhaps something to consider. I would consider text banks, myself, if you don't have enough time to approach people more personally, and people refuse to phone bank. Something to think about with texts is that people respond much, much, much better to a text from someone they know than a stranger. I think we all in the room know why that is. We're very socialized to get a lot of random text from candidates. That's quite annoying. And without texting software, so there are these texting platforms. I'm sure a lot of us have done volunteer texting before. It can be really manual and onerous to copy and paste messages to people rather than phone banking. I honestly think texting is most useful to invite people to an event or remind people to go to an event rather than having a direct solicitation. That's been my personal experience seeing across various volunteer fundraising groups over the years. Chief Activism Officer is a job. That is correct, Nancy. He did create that title for himself. Social media ads. So this is tricky. My spouse works in social media ads, so I've gotten some good talking tos about that. But basically, if you were asking me this question in 2018, it would be a different landscape. It took very little for an organization to pop in social media ads and make things work. They could kind of dribble in like 50, 100, $200. Nowadays, Facebook has really gone away from honestly supporting smaller organizations or nonprofits. And oftentimes what is recommended is if you can't put at least, say, $5,000 or $10,000 into an ad budget, you're not going to see the returns from a fundraising front. And I mean, maybe y'all are sitting with like some sweet bank accounts and you're looking to like play with money and explore, but usually I would say 5,000 to 10,000 is a pretty out of touch number for a group of volunteers. So social media ads, we don't put up here because it's something to consider for groups with honestly a bigger budget. I would think for $5,000, $10,000, you would want that group's budget to be somewhere in the $500,000 or more a year range. Yeah, I know. She really could have done a fundraiser at her house. I couldn't agree more. Hopefully she did, and we just didn't know about it because we're not her friends, you know? What questions do we have about digital?
I mean, I have more of a maybe comment than a question. The way I use email is I will combine an email from an organization with my own sort of personal outreach to friends in my own network, which, you know, my network cuts across lots of different groups I'm part of. And then you know, I generally have a pretty, you know, like 50% of the people might respond in some fashion. And I think that's pretty good. Doesn't mean they're taking an action, maybe not, but I've found just the combination useful because I feel like I look over where to kind of help land my personal message, but I combine it with something. And so, you know, I'm constantly reshaping it depending on what's happening and what I want to do in the person. And then I see where that goes with, you know, how many people responded, and I will have further engagement. So just the lens that I bring to it. Just one off.
Yeah, that's really great, Vera. And something you can think about for those that do respond, people don't give the maximum amount that they can give from an email. So that could be, you know, a list of people you can follow up with to maybe, if you feel comfortable, having one-on-one asks with them, because that's, you know, then a $50 gift becomes a $500 gift when you have that higher touch point with them. Across the 14 tactics, which do you like best for building long-term relationship and ongoing donations? Oh my gosh, that is such a great question, Tom. I was trying not to give away answers, but okay, we'll get to the next slide and we'll talk about it. I'll give answers. Okay, so this slide is big. It's meant to be meaty. You don't have to memorize this. It's covering the 4 tactics that we talked about, the examples that we talked about. So each of those different 14 tactics, using things to consider. My favorites are a combination of the social gatherings and asking people. I think social gatherings are really great for an opportunity for people to have a stronger sense of community and efficacy, especially in these times where we're all sitting alone in front of our phones, doomsday scrolling, panicking, blah, blah, Trump. It's a great way to get people out of our own zoomies. I'm a cat parent, so I say, you know, zoomies in that kind of sense of just like, we're spiraling, I think asking people can be really powerful. Specifically with your friends that you know they're so passionate about the cause, but for whatever reason, they're not a part of your group or they don't consider themselves an activist. Asking people can be a really great time, you know, not only to talk about the organization that you're fundraising for, but also thinking about, you know, really exploring. It can kind of be what the kids call like a deep canvassing conversation, a deep listening conversation, sort of getting a sense of, you know, what concerns you about today? What are you most excited about? You know, what do you think is holding you back on whatever next steps are? So those are my 2 personal favorites, but I think it's important for y'all to figure out what makes sense for you. I'm coming from this space as somebody, my whole focus is I want to build more volunteers in the progressive space through having more volunteer fundraisers. And so whatever freaking way sounds good to you, you should go with that. I would have very heavy yellow sign caution tape on anybody that tells you there is one best way to fundraise, abandon all else, you should only do this. You're never going to get that from me. You should never get that from anybody. It should be what you feel makes sense for your group, your resources, and whatever excites you. Okay, Nancy, asking people type, giving circles fall into that group. Okay, so interesting enough, so there's 2 concepts, right? There's tactics and there's models. So giving circles actually could kind of be done with a lot of these different tactics in mind. The whole point of a giving circle, so it is what I would call a fundraising model. And by model, I mean it's how people get together on an ongoing basis, how they think about themselves as a team. A giving circle is where people get together, usually people that already know each other, and they say, hey, let's come together and talk about this certain issue that we care about most. Sure, maybe defeating Trump 2024, whatever it is. And let's research some organizations and decide where to donate to. Something that's a close cousin to a giving circle is what's called a donor circle. The States Project, for those that are familiar, they do donor circles pretty well. They've got it pretty nicely made where you're raising funds for a particular organization. But they give you some sort of thing to choose. I consulted with them when they were early in their giving circle days. So it was kind of a question of how do we make people feel like they're making a choice in something, even though they're fundraising for us? And the way that the model was decided was pick a state, so you're fundraising for the States Project, but they work to flip state legislatures all across the country. Which state are you interested in focusing on, flipping or holding those chambers? And so the focus with a giving circle is that you bring people together to talk about those key issues, whatever it might be, and they're moving resources. And I come from the land of multi-level marketing schemes, and I very lovingly say it's a great organizing model that we should be using more on the left. And a giving circle is kind of that model. You want to usually invite more people into your giving circle. Some giving circles are closed, but those types of giving circles, they tend to give like very big checks. It's like, oh, it's only us 10 people, but we're writing like, $10,000 checks or something that might be very big and meaningful to us. For, groups where you want to raise a lot of money and you want to be open to different income ranges, then you want to have an open giving circle where you're inviting more people into it. So the way to invite more people into it, giving circles do, especially asking people in social gatherings. So I might go around if I am starting a giving circle, and I might set up one-on-ones with each of you to invite you into my giving circle. I might host a kickoff gathering for the giving circle saying, hey, we're going to talk about our giving circle and what we're doing. Would you like to join? So giving circles are a model rather than a tactic. And they use a lot of these tactics that are in here, with the goal being to get people to join the giving circle by giving an ambitious gift and coming to the regular gatherings. A lot of folks I know on the left have been saying like a giving circle is sending out emails, and I'm like, no, not quite, but sure. Do folks have other questions about? Experience with using very low dollar online fundraisers as a way to identify possible volunteers. For example, donate $10 to help flip District 13 for people who have not volunteered or donated before. Bruce, I have seen that. I would say I would save the very low ball asks for people that you genuinely either don't have the bandwidth to reach them or you don't have the time. So it's late in the cycle. You're like, sure, like $10 from you is better than nothing. But we're in January right now. So what I would recommend for those that have not donated or volunteered before is actually creating some kind of engagement plan that can go a little deeper, because you don't want to make your ask be $10 for people that can give $100, that give $1,000. Oh, the fundraising ask when people have both threadbare pants and deep pockets in the context of a social gathering. That's a great question, Steve. It's a whole separate training that we could do on fundraising ask, but the short answer is that there's a concept in fundraising called anchoring. And so something, that I have seen done working very successfully in the situations where there's both high dollar and lower dollar folks in the room is giving a framing that helps people think about the importance relative to what they have. So it could be something like, I want us all to think about, what is our investment in democracy today? Right. Is it the equivalent of a mortgage payment? And that's kind of like for the higher net worth folks, right? Like, give the equivalent of your mortgage payment. You care about our democracy. Or is it giving up going out to eat once a month and setting up a recurring donation? So thinking about ways where, you're kind of creating a big picture, big stakes item, and then offering different ways for people to think about that big stakes item in a way that they can do it. Because like, if you ask me, I'm like, mortgage, people my age don't have mortgages. And also I don't have that ability. But sure, a monthly donation, I can do that, equivalent of a dinner out each month. Yeah. What else are we wondering, folks?
I guess, so what about preference for ongoing versus one-time donations when you're making a pitch?
I mean, ongoing is generally preferable by, I would say, your generic nonprofit. I think when starting out, focusing on one time just to experiment around more, honestly, getting recurring can be, it's tricky for any organization to figure out. If and when you're doing recurring, you could have it as like a little button on every single one of your emails as an offer for people to have, make it clear that they can do recurring donations. You can also have a specific event or campaign that's dedicated to building recurring donors. But you don't want to split the ask of be like, you can give one time or you can give monthly. And then people will be like, what do you want me to do? You want me to give one time? You want me to give monthly? Both? Neither? So I would, especially in the beginning, focus on one time, get to know people, see the amounts that they're giving, see, how often they're giving. Is it like they're showing up to maybe all of your events and giving, just so you can have some data to work with, and then build out the ongoing, the monthly sustainers. Is there a benchmark for getting recurring? What do you mean, Steve? Could you elaborate?
You could expect 2% of emails to be open, well, to be read, 50% to be opened. Is there any kind of expectation in terms of what kind of percentage one might expect to be able to convert from just a one-time donor to a recurring donor?
It's all over the place.
There is no industry benchmark,
There
is what
isn't.
you're telling me.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, my friends. Now we're going to talk about online versus IRL really quickly. And this is going to then segue us into building a team to do this work together. But just some quick, top line items, when thinking about online versus IRL for any kind of social gathering, we want to think about COVID-19 safety. We want to think about event planning. We want to think about geography and what I call technology tolerance. So COVID-19, if your folks are having real hesitations about COVID-19 risk, especially with, spikes that we're having right now, or, at the time that you're planning things, it's worthwhile to consider online. It's totally safe. But considering in person, if you can have some clear COVID-19 protocols, whether it's masks, testing, whatever, is comfortable and ideal for your spaces. Event planning looks different online versus offline, as we all know. In person, if you have people that can do resources for logistics, like hosting a physical space, they can get donated food, drink, they have planning experience, that's great to go that way. A lot of people kind of default by saying, oh, Zoom's easier. I wouldn't say necessarily Zoom's easier. It's definitely more accessible and convenient. But you do need people to understand some basics of Zoom tech. And I will say, this is kind of a moment where I'll acknowledge that a lot of volunteer fundraising groups, what they do is sort of webinar format. Oftentimes when they do virtual, it's just kind of like talk at you, give you information, and you don't allow for donors to connect with one another, which, we referenced earlier, 3 to 5 times more lifetime giving. Why are we giving up on that? So something we would recommend is to think about how you can create interactive facilitation that can sort of mimic in-person facilitation, breakouts, Q&A, sharing the Zoom chat, collaborative whiteboards, whatever else. Geography, very clear and simple, but if you're very place-based, it's within the county, city, whatever else, consider in person. If it's kind of spread apart, the internet's great to bring us together like it is today. Technology tolerance, honestly, what I've seen this come up is, for those of us that have groups of people that have office day jobs and they're on Zoom all day, the last thing they want to do is join a Zoom in the evening. They would much rather come to your place and hang out and be around real humans rather than a screen. But for those, especially those that work with retired or almost retired folks, they don't have the Zoom fatigue in the same way and they're down to pop in. It's a lot more convenient for them. So we're going to do a very quick journaling moment. I'm just going to give us a minute to digest all this info. And I would love for you to journal out one tactic you'd like to bring back to your group. So we're going to have just a little minute of silence here. I'm going to put on a timer, and then we're going to come back for a sharing moment. Be right back. A minute flies by when you're having fun. Okay. Hopefully you at least picked a tactic, and we're gonna do a little very quick group Zoom chat activity. Okay. It's called Waterfall. And so what we're gonna do, you're gonna open up the Zoom chat at the bottom. Many of us have already typed in the Zoom chat before, so we're used to it. You're gonna type in the tactic that you want to try out, but you're not gonna hit enter yet. You're not gonna do it. Not gonna hit enter yet. We're gonna do it together. Amazing. Okay, perfect. What we got here? Steve's gonna fund a phone banker. Rebecca, make sure there's an in-person aspect to our next online fundraiser. Tom, host house parties around the country. Various hosts, pairs of presenters, outdoors if possible. Anna, I want to try out digital within a friend group. Make a text pitch. Heck yeah. Vera, I'd like to combine a novel fun event with fundraising. Patty, pay another to phone bank. Carol, raffle barbecue, use an event. Nancy, personal ask, group based. Raj, community events. Lisa, text banking. Colleen, I want to have a car wash with my group. Oh my God, yes. Bruce, house parties. Joan, auction. Oh my God, this is so fun, huh? We got some fun ways of doing this. Let's congratulate ourselves. Woo! We picked something. And now becomes the point where people come to me and they're like, okay, but Haley, but how? You do it in a team. So the next, the rest of the session, we're going to be focused on building a fundraising team and talking through that. What is a volunteer fundraising team? It's a structured group of volunteers. Y'all have shared roles and norms, methods for meeting, coordinating. You've been on a team before. You know what I'm talking about. The key thing is as little as 3 people. People are always asking Haley, why 3? If I was a mathematician, I would tell you that there's some really powerful math behind triangles and the strengths of them. When you talk to any sort of civil engineers, there's a lot of power in, the sort of 3 edges and corners there. What I'll say realistically, though, is for 3 people, it's really nice because if one person has to fall off for a little bit for family reasons, work reasons, whatever it is, it's not a solo person stuck alone. You have 2 people where you can spend some time trying to recruit another 3rd person again. That's why it's as little as 3 people. So you can consider yourself a team member. What you gotta do is find 2 other people. That's bare minimum to make a team. Psychological needs for well-being. You're like, why is this on the slide, Haley? We are not in a psychology seminar. That's true. And also there's this thing that happens oftentimes. People be like, Haley, nobody wants to volunteer anymore. Haley, nobody wants to lead. They just want to attend a postcarding party and go home. Well, you know what, people? I don't know if that's always true. What makes people take on high stakes asks is these 3 things right here. Nancy has a PhD in this, so she should be giving this portion of the presentation, but they are autonomy, they are relatedness, they are competence. Autonomy is that we perceive that we have choices. So maybe you give me a list of donors to call. I get to decide when I call them. Maybe there's a little bit of a script, but I can adapt it according to whatever my needs are. I'm not being barked orders. You're not my mom. I can do some things that I would like. Relatedness is to give and receive care from others. There's a common phrase in social movements that you come for the issues, stay for the people. And that's what keeps people coming back. You know, it might be that, of course, you want to fundraise for XYZ cause, but also, isn't it nice to sit in Judy's living room with popcorn as you plan the next fundraiser together? That's also pretty sweet. The final piece is competence. This is actually a key one with fundraising, right? Because a lot of us on the left are like, oh, I never fundraised before. Oh my God, I've never built a team before. Totally understandable. And, you know, it's really important that we feel effective in meeting our challenges. So a way to reframe that is, I am curious and excited to try new things. I'm excited to experiment. I'm excited to learn, and that can help build people's sense of competence over time, is to go away from there is only one structured way to do it into this is learning and experimentation. Building a team, 5 steps. We're going to go through them all. I will say part of your Google Drive goodie bag is going to be additional supplemental resources on each of this. So I am purposely going through this rapid fire for us. There's supplementary materials that you're going to have, and we'll also do Q&A. So there's going to be plenty of time to get the information and resources you need. But at a high level, first step is identifying your people. So you're finding the 2 or more other people that are joining your team together. The 3 or more of you are identifying your why. You make the asks to join you. You host a kickoff. Can't keep that finger down. And then you provide support and community. So we're going to go through those in detail together. I'll pause occasionally for questions, but this one we're intending to zip through on purpose because you're going to have lots of resources after this. Identifying your people. So oftentimes people will be like, Haley, send out this email with a Google form for people to sign up for a volunteer fundraising team. And nobody signed up. And it's like, oh, well, yeah. I understand the temptation when we look at the circles of commitment image on the left to think about people that are further on the outside. We're kind of thinking like, oh, it's a great way to invite new people in. But when we're getting started on things, it's actually kind of our core and committed people are the people that we should be making asks of. They're very excited about our group. Even if they're a little bit nervous Nelly about fundraising, they want to make sure that we're successful. And so you want to think about people that are connected to your mission and that they've already given their talent, their time, their treasure, you know, testimony ties, the big 5 T's in fundraising, they call it. And I would say personally to start with 5 people, you know, 5 people isn't too hard to think about. You can build that list over time if you'd like, but 5 is a nice start. For each person, this is a key thing, and this is what the kids call relational mapping, is to list out some of their skills, their strengths, their connections. I might kind of think to myself, I want to invite Vera onto my team because, you know, she's got that legal background. She's going to help us make sure that we know how to handle our raffles. You know, she's got compliance together. Okay, Nancy loves giving fundraising pitches in person. That would be great to have her do that. So just kind of listing that out explicitly so you can kind of start seeing like, oh, this is what we have to offer here. A little favorite quote of mine just at the bottom. You don't have to know one rich person to bring in $1,000. You can build it $10 at a time. And that's the beautiful thing behind a team. Defining your why. Okay, so once you have your people, it's getting a sense of, you know, why are you fundraising? How does it serve a larger purpose for your group? An example that I built out with a volunteer a couple years ago was they wanted to create a team of 5 volunteers to build their group's leadership. Oh, Yolo County, look at that. I mentioned you, Vera, as the example. I like to switch out the examples. There we go. That's an example for Vera and Steve to work with. So the path to get there. So your why you have defined, like, you know, we want to have this team that allows us to raise funds to, you know, flip these key counties, whatever else, is thinking about what resources do you have and what tactics should you use based on those resources. The great thing is y'all already did this. We did this when we did our little waterfall chat. You know what you want to do. But you know, when you're thinking about the resources, you want to think about both tangible and intangible things. So money, materials, equipment, knowledge, creativity, goodwill. But this is so nice. You already have it done. This is great. You don't have to worry about it. Step 3, check. But what you do want to ask is make the ask for people to join you at whatever tactic that you decided. So, you know, get a strong yes from folks. You know, ideally when you're making the ask for people to join your team, you're making it a personalized ask. You're asking, you know, why they gave their time or resource to your organization, advice on your program, referencing their skills, strengths, and connections that you already have for them. Something to know, especially when building a team early on, is that people don't always say yes right away. People might say, I'm busy. I'm busy doesn't necessarily always mean that they're actually too busy to do this. We all could take it very literally. And I don't know can be transformed into a yes if we understand why somebody is hesitant. So, you know, if I were to call Steve and say, hey, I would love for you to join Indivisible YOLO's fundraising team. I think you were so great at the kickoff event. You really knew how to manage volunteers at the sign-in booth, whatever, you know, insert flattery here. Would you like to join us? And Steve is like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. The key thing here, you might have internal panic. All you need to do is, oh, Steve, why is that? And, you know, Steve might come back with me, I've never fundraised before. You have an answer for what the I don't know is. He's nervous because he's never done it before. So the way that you can address that, and we have a really cool worksheet that helps you kind of think about the common things that people might say and how to address this is, that's not a problem. We expect this is going to be people's first time. We're going to train you. We're going to answer any questions you have. Do you have a specific thing that you're concerned about? And then you can drill it again. It's kind of like, you know, keep going. Like, you have a specific thing you're concerned about. Oh, I don't know if I want to ask people in person for money. Don't worry. We've already identified somebody that's going to do the first house party pitch. So you're going to have to do it right off the bat. We do have the opportunity if you want to learn to pitch. But you don't have to either. There's some other great things you can do. What would you like to do? And so on and so forth. But basically this slide is to say that I think a lot of times we take I don't knows or we take, I'm so busy at surface level and we leave it at that. We mark the person as no and move on. These people you have a relationship with, interrogate a little bit, learn a little more. They're still going to like you. Yes, Rebecca, we will get you those resources. Thanks for coming. Can you tell me more? The wide open question with responses. I could not agree more, Vera. Okay, so, you know, we've taught you how to make your asks to people. We're gonna host a kickoff now. People are gonna get together and do this. So what does a kickoff look like? We have the formula right here for you for a fundraising team kickoff. And it's 4 parts. First is setting the context. So Indivisible YOLO is a group that was founded in blah, blah by blah, blah. We do XYZ in order to ABC. You also, it's an opportunity to say like, hey, Steve, I wanted you to join because you're really great at this thing. You know, Tom, I really appreciate the way that you bring people into a room and get them really excited to be together with one another. Just kind of go around, you know, talk about the goals, the why now. Another piece of a kickoff is sharing stories, which, I mean, it could just be, you call it get to know you conversations. It doesn't have to be that deep, but just kind of, you know, backgrounds, what inspires each of you to be there. A little bit of practice. What we have found to be successful, a lot of groups avoid this step. They're like, oh, I don't talk about money and scare people. It doesn't have to be that scary, but you should name the elephant in the room. Like, you're going to be fundraising. Like, we all feel weird about money. I'll talk through an exercise that you can go through with your group to kind of demystify that. But the final piece is that you take some action together. You create a little team charter, which will give you a guide that comes from Power Labs on that. You can brainstorm ideas on what you want to do for that first fundraising tactic that you've decided on today. You can set some goals, whatever it might be. But that's kind of the 4-part formula to kind of host a kickoff where people are very much more likely to continue on with you and be a part of your team. Okay, so there's a lot of text on this, but this is just something I wanted y'all to have for later as a potential 15-minute exercise for, you know, sort of working through money. Is you can have people write down their reflections on what is their earliest history of money, what messages, ideas, or attitudes about money were conveyed to them by their parents or others in their community. So the journal moment, then you have a parent share moment, and then in the full group, you talk about the themes that came up, you write them all down, they're pretty much all negative. But then you have a segue moment where you're kind of like, okay, in an ideal world, what would be taught about to children to think about as money? You know, like how does this change how we feel about money as adults? My favorite one, that's a 3rd bullet point in part 4 here. I ask this in every dang training I do for folks, is who benefits from social justice leaders feeling weird about money? That's just a little preview exercise for you. Take or leave. There's going to be other little exercises that are offered in the little toolkit that you can decide on for yourself that have different fun ways to get people together, talk about money. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal. This is kind of the ongoing piece, right? This is something after the kickoff, just kind of thinking about what makes people stay in teams when we were talking about, autonomy, relatedness, competence. These are kind of the pieces that will deliver it for folks. So one is sharing appreciation. There is this book that I read that is cited there, $, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. You don't want to read that book. Don't worry, I did. But basically, it is research on peer-to-peer fundraising in the medical research community. So thinking about Relay for Life, March on Dimes, those kinds of things. And they compared volunteer fundraisers in 3 categories. One category of volunteers, people received a market-based incentive. They got an iPad if they raised the most amount of money on their team. The other got a social-based incentive. They got a little cardboard trophy saying that they did some great superlative thing. Vera had the most creative outfit during our Relay for Life walk, and we're handed it that day. Third category, as the research kids say, control, no treatment. What was found disproportionately is the people that were most likely to fall off a cliff, not do anything, not sign up again, say bad things about their volunteer experience was they were offered the shiny iPad. Those that were most likely to not only be the most successful in their volunteerism, the most satisfied in the outcomes of it and reporting that they want to do it again and then actually doing it again were people that got the silly cardboard trophies. Appreciation is really undervalued. And we like to feel like our actions reflect our values. And so when you can highlight that for people that they're doing that, I'm the same way. I love when people tell me, oh, Haley, wow, you provide fundraising training for volunteers. You're really living into your, it's like, oh, thank you. Wow, that's great. So appreciation, so underrated, so important. Another piece is blending the formal and informal in gatherings. So, oftentimes on the left, we're so boring in our meetings. It's like, come together, strict agenda meeting, corporate vibes, but you're not being paid to do this. It's like, ugh, this is awful. Think about it like y'all are a broke PTA group, right? People bring in sort of like potluck foods. They do get the business done of like, what fundraiser for the school are we going to do? But they also eat together, have some gossip, sort of before and after. So really think about the unstructured time in addition to the structured time. Final piece, asynchronous and synchronous support. Asynchronous, this is time where you're not together with people so that they can feel supported. So it could be a toolkit, could be your email just for questions that aren't so frequent to be asked. Synchronous is the time that you're together. So thinking about office hour or community call during peak periods, maybe you have, a certain big fundraising campaign that you're looking to get out the door over the next 2 weeks. So you want to have a community call before that, before people go into their networks. I am seeing comments. Okay, this is a great lesson. It feels so rare. Oh yeah, so friends, it was so nice to have them while they were here. Okay, so we went through the 5 steps. I went through them very quickly. We'll have time at the end to dive into this further, but I really want to do this exercise with y'all. So we're going to go into a little activity, but before we do, we're going to play a quick game of Have You Ever? Have I ever? We're teenagers again. It's so great. I would love for you to put in the chat or put a thumbs up emoji on your little Zoom icon image. Have you ever RSVP'd to something you were excited to attend, then didn't end up making it? Nancy says yes. Vera says yes. Tom's thumbs up. Carol, yes. Bruce, yes. Anna, yep. Oh my gosh, y'all, it might be just human nature that we can't make all the things that we want to attend. Okay, now, second one. Again, go in the chat or give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Have you ever organized an event where a small fraction of the RSVPs showed up? Yes, yes. Okay. What this exercise was meant to do is just to acknowledge both that we have experienced the problem and we've also been the problem. It's just human condition. People get busy, all these things. And so what happens on the left is we're like, oh, recruitment, such a hard problem. Well, today, my friends, we're going to do a quick exercise. You're going to envision that you're planning a team kickoff event for your volunteer fundraising team. People are always like, Haley, is it virtual or in person? I don't care. Use your imagination. Bring that child joy. Do you want to be on Zoom? Do you want to be in your living room? It's up to you, whatever suits your group. It is 100% okay. I could not agree more, Anna. What we're going to do, this is a big slide. So many colors and text. But what we're going to do is we're going to generate as a group ideas for recruiting and retaining volunteers. So if we start at the top, it's a problem. It just is across the board, right? A lot of us are like, oh, nobody wants to volunteer anymore. Nobody wants to come to things anymore. But let's talk about specifics with barriers. Let's just name the elephant in the room. We have 4 barriers listed here. People don't have enough time or resources to volunteer. People don't think they'd make good volunteers. People don't feel like they're making a difference. People forget that they signed up to volunteer. And so what we're going to do together, I would love for us to open up a blank Word or Google Doc. I want you to be typing, oftentimes in journal prompts, open for free flow, but we want to make sure that we're crowdsourcing this. So I am going to give just a few seconds for us to get a little doc open, something to type into. If somebody still is opening up a Google or Word doc, could you come off of mute or share in the chat that you need time? Okay, you don't need time. So what we're going to do together, and by together, I mean you're each going to do individually right now, is you're going to take 4 minutes to come up with 4 ideas that address this problem, that address these barriers. You all are experts. I don't want you to get team perfectionistic. This is not edit mode. This is just write mode. We're in ideation mode. Get creative. Don't worry about being perfect. I am going to put music on, but I'll start the timer now. Welcome back, everyone. Hello, hello. You have some ideas, and I have some ways for us to get those ideas out into the world. Okay, so we're going to do what's called design telephone as the next step. So what we're going to do, and I'll put these directions right now in the chat ahead of time so we have them available to us. We are going to get into breakout groups in Zoom of 2 to 3 people. We're going to quickly introduce ourselves and paste our ideas in the Zoom chat. Talk about edits or updates that we would give to those ideas. We're in improv class right now. This is a yes and moment. It's not a, we're not saying like your idea sucks, because all of our ideas are great. After you've had time to do that, you're going to paste your ideas into the Google Doc that is linked in the chat. So what we're going to do, I am going to select breakout rooms. And let's see. Okay, we're going to do 4 breakout rooms. I am going to put us on timer for 6 minutes to do such a thing. And then we'll come back and sort of debrief and think about next steps together. Sound good, friends? All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hello. Hope you had a fabulous time making a new friend or 2 and putting your ideas into that doc. I wanted to walk through for us what's in our goodie bag, have a little bit of a moment for sort of reflections, and then talk about next steps. So, okay, what's going to be in your goodie bag to come. It's already fresh, made for you. It's going to be hitting your inboxes whenever, the follow-up email for attendees comes, but it'll include this slide deck that we went through today, materials for steps 1 through 5 on building your volunteer fundraising team, all your recruitment ideas. Isn't that fantastic? You're not at this alone. You don't have to do frantic Googles of how to blank. All this stuff is right there. So I would love for us to come back together and, feel free to share in the chat or come off of mute. What's one thing you're taking away from today? Or what's the one thing that you're leaving behind from today? Yes, Bruce, I love the art of gathering. It is one of my favorites. I strongly recommend, especially for those of us that chose a social gathering for what we would like to do for our fundraising tactic. She is brilliant. She has a really great blog, would recommend subscribing. Yeah, what's one thing that you're taking away from today?
I liked the, except I've moved away from the screen, but that slide that had sort of the icebreaker thing for having people write down the reflections about their earliest memory of money, all that stuff, that I thought was great. I really liked that.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, that comes from one of my fundraising mentors, Kim Klein. She wrote this book, Fundraising for Social Change. You don't have to read as a volunteer, but if you ever become an ED, an executive director of a nonprofit in the social change space, would recommend. So Nancy really enjoyed the step-by-step instructions for building a team. Vera, there are resources for us and that we're resources for each other. Yes. Joan, learning the importance of supporting volunteers. Tom says a clear idea for how we can form a team and hold a series of house parties. Raj, all of these. I feel that too. I'm feeling real warm and fuzzy right now. What are other reflections that are coming up? Anybody have anything else they'd like to share?
I have one thing I would like to share. It's too bad that a lot of people had other commitments and had to leave before now, but I just wanted to send a huge heartfelt appreciation to you, Haley. You are such an asset to the ecosystem, and we are all so lucky to have you. And I know all of you here have been charmed by Haley and have seen what incredible enthusiasm and talent and skills and resources that she brings, that they bring to the field. And I hope that you can show some appreciation by donating. Here is the link to Haley's website, and that has a big donation button on the right. And I actually just donated, and I was hoping it would give me one of those things that said, please join me in donating, so I could give a little bit of the social proof so that you could all feel like Nancy donated. Nancy's cool. I want to be like Nancy and donate to Haley as well, because these dollars that we donate to Donor Organizer Hub are massively leveraged. We can see what they have done today for us. So the hours that they spent with us, we are going to take that away, and we are going to use it to get more dollars in the world to build durable, progressive infrastructure. And so every dollar that goes to Haley's organization is multiplied by probably on the order of 1,000. So I hope that all of you can give today to Donor Organizer Hub.
Nancy, my heart, I want to cry. That is such a sweet and delightful gift and surprise and invitation. I want to say also an added bonus is every single donor to Donor Organizer Hub does get a sweet little sticker. Nancy and Vera can attest. And it's so funny because you did my job for me. I was gonna do a nice little plug, but
I didn't even know. I didn't even
no,
know. Yeah.
Y'all, I have been training and coaching Nancy. So if you want to be as confident and excited about putting on a fundraising pitch as Nancy is, come to our training.
You've learned well, Grasshopper.
And I would encourage you all too, whenever you're hosting things, we talked about pitching at events, try it out. Don't be shy. It doesn't take too much, get somebody that's confident and excited. You don't have to be confident. They can just pretend that they're confident. And so now we have technically 7 minutes, but I'm here all night, y'all. All that I have left is to do dishes and feed my cat. They can wait. So I would love to open up the floor. My email is listed there, but I will type that out. Here you go. You know how to get a hold of me. Hi, Anna.
Hi. So how do you set the expectation, right? Like I think one of the important things about both house parties and community event gatherings or whatever is setting the expectation, as you said, of the donation, and how do you overcome, like there are people that will think they're going to give you $50 and end up giving you $500 again because of social pressure and and things like that. So how do you set the expectation? Okay, I'm a donor to progressive causes. I'm a solid donor. I'm also a fundraiser. Like I also help some organizations fundraise with messaging through digital work. So part of the thing to me is this disconnect between the $5 ask and the $3,300 ask. And how do you bridge that, right? Because the person that you make the $5 ask, discerning your population so that you know who in that $5 ask can actually ask for more. And also build the ladder of engagement so that someone that doesn't feel but doesn't feel comfortable giving the $3,300, so you can get them to the $3,300 ask, right? Like that's the art. That's where all this comes in. And how do you build that? How do you build those, again, ladders of engagement of the in between, or of the bring a guest, and your guest might not be able to give the $3,300, but you're showing them that other people are, right? Yeah, how do you do that?
I mean, there's a lot of beautiful ways. The short answer, right, is if there was a magic way to do it, oh my God, we wouldn't need to fundraise at all, right? Like our things would be funded. It's so great. So it is something that you kind of learn, based on your people as you go. Honestly, one thing about it straight up, and I tell people over and over again, is, show some basic love, respect, and care to people that contribute, at whatever amount. And, a separate set of trainings that we have with folks, it's about, gratitude practice and thinking about what makes sense. What is something that every donor gets? For donor organizer hub, you get a sweet sticker. It's so cute. And just kind of thinking about what those different levels look like, because every single person that contributes, you don't know what that $5 means to them. It could mean, for them, like, that is actually 1/3 of their hourly salary. And that's something very special to them. For other people, they might be giving you $5 just to see how you respond to them. And I'll be honest, you can put me on YouTube and, get me all viral for saying a spicy thing, but like on the left, we treat our, progressive grassroots donors like crap. And so if you can really, think of a way that's sustainable for you all, I'm not saying you have to do handwritten thank yous for everybody, but really think about, like what's a way that we can do something that's a bit more to show appreciation than just the automated email, that sends the thanks after people give. So gratitude practice is one. Working on earlier, something to think about too, especially if you're thinking about social gatherings, is kind of utilizing the group to kind of help bring things further. We didn't do a fundraising ask train today. We could explore one together in the future if you all want to get really geeky about fundraising asks and how they can look. But you can kind of think about what is an ambitious group amount that you can fundraise in total. And that can kind of help people think about like, oh, we want to get to $5,000 tonight. Oh yeah, I can write, that $1,000 check, like gotta help people get to that 5,000. It also, when we talked about earlier, I think maybe Tom, you asked the question, we talked about anchoring. So that helps people think about their relative access. Like, can you give that mortgage payment? Like, are you a managerial or owning class person? Okay, like that's what we're asking for you tonight. That's your investment in democracy. Specifically around asks as well. You can
honestly. How do you do that? So because I'm surrounded by that. Yeah. By that class of people that can donate like I do, for example. Yep. That they can write that big check. How do you get them how do you bridge that gap between, like, I think of myself, when did I start donating? 2016, right? Like, that's easy. Like, that's when I started donating to political causes, and it was minimal. And as I have worked in the space, it's grown because I know what it can do, right? Like, I know what my money can do and does.
Mhm.
So, I didn't know that before, right? Like, I had no, it was blank. It was like one big curtain. How do you bridge those conversations? And it doesn't mean that everybody you get in a room who can do it will do it. I don't expect that, but I do. How are those asks made in such a way that people feel more comfortable doing it? How's that?
Yes.
Sorry.
Anna, that was beautiful, very thoughtful. You're in a fun place. I'm excited for you this year and what you're about to embark on. If I were you, I am not you, so you can edit accordingly. I don't know all your context. It sounds like you want to do some rounds of asking people directly, one-on-one asks, setting up coffee dates where they're kind of like, and Tom and I were talking about this actually, while y'all were in breakout rooms, because Tom and I stayed out here together, is having a sort of listening tour, like really getting to understand, what, concerns do you have? What, are you most excited or nervous about going into this year? And then tying it specifically into solution space, right? Like I've been volunteering with X group, we've been doing ABC, something I'm wondering about from you, and you can kind of get into that sort of bit, once you kind of know a little bit more, what are their interests and their focus, and you can kind of work with that. So I recommend, especially for your like higher net worth folks where you kind of don't know how they're, if they're going to come to a social gathering or, if they feel comfortable writing that bigger check, I would do some one-on-one asking, at least priming to get a sense of what their interests are, and you can kind of decide for yourself, your people best, like, are you going to make a direct ask there? Or is your ask there to invite them to an event where they then, are invited to contribute? So I think it seems like the pathway next for you, for those people that you're talking about, you're going to have some one-on-ones, and in the goodie bag, you're going to get one of my favorite resources is a PDF from Montgomery Education Association. They talk about primers for one-on-ones with hard asks, and it's a very sweet resource that I think you'll.
Okay.
Cool.
Hi, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you're not talking to candidates, you don't have to be at 3,300 either. So we do a lot of fundraising for on the ground groups. It's with fewer limits, but which doesn't simplify the asking process though, or setting up what's the right ask to ask for. To your point, Anna.
Yeah, asking is definitely an art and a science.
I mean, I think as much as we can, whether it's with in front of a group of people, some of whom we know, some of whom we don't, or one-on-one, just honestly speaking from the heart. I know this, I don't want to sound like a cliche, but sharing your story and how you got to where you are. If people know anything about you, then that can have some meaning for them. And if they can see themselves in the story, any part of it that you're telling, I think that can help support them perhaps in where they are on their own journey. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Right.
that's what
Okay.
comes to mind for me.
I love that, Vera. And for those of us that maybe, haven't had any experience of sort of the sharing our stories and also sharing it kind of in a context where it sort of builds, what, who I am, why I'm here, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and sort of the larger, like, what are we doing together? There's something called public narrative. Marshall Gans, I think Bruce referenced it earlier in the chat. Marshall Gans is an organizer from back in the day, United Farm Workers. Kind of more recently, he was instrumental in developing Obama's 08, field teams, like the sort of scaled house party model. And a key piece that he highlights with public narrative training, it's kind of story of self, story of us, story of now. So the story of self is like your backstory, story of us is kind of collectively what we're experiencing together, this doomsday, and the story of now of like, this is a moment, 2024, like, we can actually, you know, protect our democracy, and like, here are the stakes and here's how. So that can be a really great resource. I send that, that's a format actually of a fundraising ask that I'll offer for folks to, a sort of model for people to kind of give that as well. So public
Right.
narrative.
All right. Thank you so much, Haley. It was good. Appreciate it.
Of course.
That was wonderful. Haley, thank you so much for, taking the time to be with us. It's been such an amazing training. Yeah, and just heartfelt thanks. Thank you so much.